The third benefit of cultural capital is that it helps us often to build another 3 forms of capital. So you have cultural capital, but it forms another 3. Let us start with one that I call faith capital. Faith capital. In every generation where, for example, the gospel has been preached, the gospel of Jesus Christ has been preached, there is always a need to understand the cultural capital of that area before one can build understanding. A fellow called Hunter Beaumont, writing in a book called Before You Lose Your Faith, he calls the gospel a kernel and the culture within which it is preached or where it comes from a husk. So a good communicator of the gospel has to understand a husk for what it is. A husk is external culture. And gently remove the husk in order to reveal the kernel or the seed. If they don't do that, they will not be understood. Why? Because we all come from particular cultures and we see things differently, and therefore we can see the gospel differently. Missionaries understood this very, very well, because to be able to speak to people, you got to know who they are, how they live, what they eat, so that you do not confuse external culture or husk, as Beaumont calls it, with the gospel. But that's communication. That's social movements. That's building a business. It's the same. Now, I think this is why Paul, my favorite communicator, I've said this many times, my favorite communicator, Paul, I think that's why in his second letter to the group called the Corinthians, in chapter 15, verse 33, that Paul, who was preaching the gospel, quotes from a popular poet called Menander. Very interesting. It's the gospel, but he's quoting culture. He's quoting Menander. Menander had lived some 300 to 400 years prior to Paul's birth. The verse which says in that 1 Corinthians 15:33, that verse that says, and I quote, "Do not be misled, bad company corrupts character," comes from Menander. Menander was an ancient comic poet who probably picked his writing from Socrates. Now, Paul uses what was contemporary culture of his listeners, not to affirm that culture, but to use it as a bridge to remove the husk and point them to the kernel, the gospel that he wanted preached. So therefore, please understand me. We build our faith, often working our way from the very culture that we are in and knowing it well, and we create understanding as we move on to the depth of knowledge that we need to change people. So cultural capital can actually build faith capital. Now, if we are not grounded into what we know, it often will be difficult to be understood or to hear what other people say, because we are not grounded in what is ours. Now, Mzee Matthew Chikeire, who we gave an award recently, fantastic old man, friend of mine, in his autobiography called 70 Years a Witness, he speaks of the power of imagery embedded in the cleansing blood of Jesus Christ when it was preached to the Banyakigezi and the Banyankore during the East African Christian revival movement of the 1940s. The spirit of brotherhood among those early Christians was so strong that they no longer saw themselves in terms of tribe or race for that matter. They had conquered these barriers miraculously. This extraordinary demonstration of oneness happened through the doctrine of the cleansing power of the blood of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. And since blood oaths were most binding covenants in African traditional beliefs, one can see how these early converts could relate to the covenant that was sealed by the blood of Jesus, close quote. So Chikeire is on to something. He's saying that the early converts, when you preached the atonement of the blood of Jesus, they understood, because friendship, traditionally you would cut something on your stomach, you put a coffee seed, and you exchange these coffee seeds with your friend, and that person is no longer friend. They are blood brothers forever. Whatever happens to one, happens to another. So Ruchikere says the understanding of that traditional African covenant really helped Africans understand the power of atonement through the blood of Jesus. So Paul himself tells us the value of cultural capital when he says, and I quote, "To the Jews, I became a Jew in order to win Jews. To those under the law, I became as one under the law, though not myself under the law, that I might win those under the law. I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some." This quotation comes from the first letter to Corinthians, chapter 9, verse 20-23. Paul is telling us that he took up the cultures of other people, understood them better in order to be able to deliver the message of the gospel. So therefore, to build faith, we don't have to import culture and behavior. We simply need to understand the context. Next week, we will speak about two other forms of capital that come out of cultural capital. They are financial capital and social capital. They are extensions of cultural capital. Have a great weekend.
I'd like to hear from you. Please email us at info@tapmedia.com and visit our website at www.tapmedia.com. You can also visit our offices located at Tomosi Business Park, Luzira, Port Bell Road, or call 0414 220 702. Thank you.